So about a year ago, I did a review of Zenless Zone Zero not long after it came out, and the video got pretty mixed reception, largely because I was pretty critical of the game, and I just don't think gacha players really like it when their gacha games are being criticized. During my first review of Zenless Zone Zero, I was critical of a lot of different aspects of the game. I found the plot to be lackluster and boring, I thought the characters were one-dimensional, I found the TV exploration to be extremely repetitive after a while, I thought the endgame content was lacking, and the list goes on. I ended up giving the game a 6 out of 10 because while I did have a lot of problems with the game, I thought this game had so much potential to grow and improve. I thought the base combat system was fun and dynamic, I find the character designs to be stellar, and I love the aesthetic and soundtrack of this game. It has now been nearly a year since I reviewed the game initially, and I am happy to report that the game has definitely improved. Zenless Zone Zero almost feels like an entirely different experience than it was a year ago because of the additions that they added and even some of the things that they removed. Because ZZZ has changed so much since I initially reviewed it, I wanted to make a follow-up video talking about the changes and also some of the things that they've improved upon since my initial review. Just to quickly set expectations before we really get into it, I just want to be clear that I am a pretty casual ZZZ player at this point. I played the game quite a bit when it first came out, but now that it's been about a year, I really only play the game when there's new story content out. I do play it sometimes when there's no story content, but I really don't play the game that much, so if I get anything wrong in this video, don't be afraid to correct me in the comments. Let's start with the biggest complaint I had about this game in my first review, which was the TV exploration. I enjoyed it, but I definitely thought that it hoarded way too much gameplay time. I don't think I was the only one with that complaint because ironically, the TV exploration, which was a core gameplay mechanic when the game first came out, is virtually non-existent now. Occasionally there are some quests and events that do use it, but overall, it's barely in the game. In fact, ZZZ has completely transformed the way its missions and quests work. Before, ZZZ was very commission-based, meaning you would go out into the main hub world, talk to some NPCs, and they would give you either combat missions or TV exploration missions that were typically pretty linear. While that formula is still present to a certain extent, the game is much more open than it was before. ZZZ's missions used to be extremely straightforward, where you were mainly just following one path and not being able to explore much. However, ZZZ started to dip their toes into exploration when they added exploration quest types, which allowed you to do a little bit more free roam with some extra objectives. And then, in ZZZ 2.0, they completely committed to free roam, and it is now a core gameplay mechanic. ZZZ's new exploration is essentially just Star Rail's exploration, but I don't think that's at all a bad thing. I feel like Star Rail's exploration is a lot more focused on the puzzles, while ZZZ's is a lot more focused on the combat. ZZZ's new open world exploration is a very welcome addition and definitely felt like a necessary layer to the game that was missing before. It's like adding cream to a cream-filled donut. Adding on to gameplay, another complaint I had about the game initially was that it didn't have enough endgame content, and I am happy to report that they definitely have added a lot more to do in the game than before. When the game initially came out, the game mainly had Hollow Zero and Chiyu Defense, and now they've added a lot more variations to those game modes, and along with some new ones like Deadly Assault and Simulated Battle Trial. Also, ZZZ has greatly improved their events. Before, I found the events to be pretty basic and not that interesting. However, they have definitely improved a lot, and there's usually a lot new gameplay mechanics that they add to these events to make them interesting. One event that comes to mind is when they essentially put Fall Guys into ZZZ with the Bang Boos. And they also added like a whole new gameplay mechanic of like platforming within ZZZ, which I thought was pretty cool. Even the recent summer event was pretty nice. They added like a new shooting minigame, they added a surfing minigame, and it all felt pretty cool. If I did have to make any complaints, I do kind of wish they did a bit more with the arcade because that was something I really loved about ZZZ when it first came out, but it feels like it's largely ignored now. And I also want to see more co-op integration. That was one of the main criticisms I had in my initial review, and I feel like we don't see as much co-op integration anymore, other than the Fall Guys event that I mentioned. So I would like to see more co-op integration within the game. Now let's touch upon the story and characters. In my initial review, I mentioned that I found the story to be lackluster, low stakes, and not very focused, and then I found the characters to be one-dimensional and not having a lot of depth. The good news is yes, ZZZ has greatly improved its writing, its characters, and its story since my initial review. Now, do I think it's perfect still? No, but I do think there has been great improvements and there's a lot more positives than negatives. While there are still some characters that don't stick out to me much, their character writing has greatly improved since the game first came out. My argument about the characters being one-dimensional is completely blown out of the water when you look at characters like Hugo Vlad, Yuzaha, Astra Yao, and Evelyn. whose character stories were pretty great. One problem I had with the characters early on is that the characters felt a lot less like characters and almost like cameos. Like they would only really show up in the missions sometimes, and we didn't really get to know them. Sure, I know what you're gonna say, that's what the agent stories are for, but even the agent stories I felt were surface layer and we didn't really dig deep into their stories. The agent stories have definitely gotten a lot better over time, and also I do appreciate that now the main story does have a lot of focus towards several of the characters, so now it's not just like, oh, here are some of the characters, and if you want to get to know them better, you gotta do their agent stories. No, they're actually presenting the stories within the main quests, which I think is great. Another complaint I had about the story was the lack of motivation we had for Wise and Bell and why they were doing what they were doing, but that definitely has since changed. We've learned a lot more about their sensei, who was being framed for essentially starting the Third Impact. Since the game came out, we definitely are a lot more focused in the story than before, because beforehand, the story mainly just felt like us hopping around and meeting new characters with not really much rhyme or reason, but now, the story is moving in a much clearer direction. We've actually been introduced to some villains, and we have an idea of who our adversaries are. We also have been able to explore some new areas that aren't just new areas of New Eridu. We actually got to visit the outskirts of New Eridu and even other areas too. My only real complaint with the story is really that it just feels like it's missing something, and I think what that is emotions. With a big exception of Hugo Vlad's story and maybe Yuzuha's story, there hasn't really been that many moments in the story that have left a big emotional impact on me. I think it's great that on an individual level these characters are getting more tragic and in-depth backstories to make them a lot more likable and memorable. However, I think when I mean emotions, I mean on a grander scale for the story. For example, when I think of Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, I can think of several moments within the story that were grand or epic that really left an impact on me. While when I think of ZZZ, there just isn't really that many moments in the story that really made me go, whoa, that was so cool. Don't get me wrong, the bosses are well designed and fun to fight, but if you asked me a moment in ZZZ that really stuck out to me, such as a favorite moment in the game, I'm not sure I would be able to give you a clear answer other than Hugo Vlad's story or Astra Yao's story, which are more story-centric and a lot less tied to the gameplay, if that makes sense. That could totally just be my own anecdotal experience though. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the story and if there's any moments in the story that really stuck out to you, and if you guys are still enjoying the story. Let me know, because I actually don't know how people on a grander scale feel about the story and plot of the game at this point. For all I know, you guys may just be skipping all of it and not giving a shit, but let me know. My final complaint about this game that still holds true for my initial review is that it still feels like such a grind fest. Sure, they do make grinding easier with some of the quality of life things that they've added, but it still feels like I am constantly grinding to try to get my characters to the level that they need to be, and I always feel like I'm lacking materials whenever I need them. Now I know it's a gacha game, grinding is a part of the gameplay, that's how it is in Star Rail and even in Genshin, but I don't know, more so even than Genshin and Star Rail, I feel like ZZZ just feels like such a grind and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I just constantly feel like I'm out of materials, maybe it's because new characters come out and then I have to farm for those materials and it's like constant and never ending. But I don't know, that part of the gameplay I've just never been really crazy about and I just never can push myself to really do it. On a grander scale though, I really don't have many complaints about the combat system. I still think it's pretty solid and that they're adding new units that definitely make the gameplay feel fresh and unique. But anyways, I believe those are all of the main points I wanted to talk about in this video. There's a chance I probably missed talking about some things, but like I said, I'm kind of a casual player at this point, so I'm not trying to do an extreme deep dive into this game and how it's changed and all of that. I'm just not super qualified to really do that since I don't play this game as much as I used to, and that's largely just because I'm suffering and drowning in gacha fatigue right now. Let me know how you guys are feeling about ZZZ at this point. Do you guys think it's gotten better? Do you guys think it never really had issues to begin with? Do you think it's gotten worse? Let me know. For me, I definitely think the game has improved a lot, and while it's not a game I'm playing all of the time, I definitely respect that it's actually trying to improve. It seems for the most part HoYoverse is genuinely trying to improve the game. I mean, they've added things and even removed things that players have liked and haven't liked. And unless things take an unexpected turn, I think things are only gonna get better too. My initial score before was a 6 out of 10, and I think I would raise it now to a 7 out of 10. A 7 out of 10 meaning it's a good game, but I do still think that they can make it even better. I want to see them continue building the story, add more high stakes, add more layers to the story, and continue continue improving the characters because you guys are going in a good direction. Gameplay-wise, I think things are pretty great. I think they just need to continue innovating, maybe play around with more game modes, maybe try playing around more with co-op integration like I mentioned, because I think that is a great avenue they could go down. Also, please, for the love of God, never make something like that Burnus song again. I will cry. Get out of my head! Get out of my head! Get out of my head! Get out of my head!